Hello, my name is Fabio, and you're watching RPTV. On Monday, February 13th, 2023, the Executive Directors Network held their first meeting of the year. The meeting was facilitated by Greg Gary, representing the Kiwanis K Club, and Leah Katerberg, co-chairing, representing for Yonge Street Mission. The guest speakers for the meeting were City of Toronto staff members Richard Kirwan, the Community Development Officer for the Downtown East, and Daniella Castello, the city's community worker serving the SDP in the Regent Park Neighbourhood. Let's go see how the meeting went.
I'm Mina Mawani, and I'm the CEO at Dixon Hall.
All right. Richard?
I'm Richard Lee. I'm the ED at C Center, Regent Park.
Thank you. Sumi?
Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. My name is Sumi Chang, and I am the Executive Director for Street Haven, a women's multi-service not-for-profit agency, including providing 2 women's shelter services in the Downtown East. Nice meeting you all.
Hi, Keith. You want to jump in?
Sure. Thanks, Greg. Keith Hambley, CEO at Fred Victor. And I'm not sure who else is.
Roberta, have you gone yet? Or Roberta, did you get to go? Mary? She's still kind of coming in. Daniella, why don't you jump in? Just, we'll have your introduction now.
Sure, thank you. My name is Daniella Castello, and I'm a community development worker with the City of Toronto, and I work in the Regent Park Neighbourhood alongside the social development plan in that network. I can pass it off to my colleague, Richard Kirwan, who's also joined us today.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. Happy Monday. I'm Richard Kirwan, the Community Development Officer in the Downtown East. And some of my major roles are the community coordination plan, which a bunch of you all sit on. And if you don't sit on it, please reach out and let me know. And I can kind of give you a brief overview of what the community coordination plan is. And it's with United Way and a ton of a Downtown East upper management, executive directors, manager level that sit at this table, so we can go from there. Sorry for my long intro, but
No, that's great. I mean, you took care of that. You took care of that for me, so I won't have to do it later when we announce you guys for your presentation. So, Leah, do you want to? I don't think Mary, are you in yet? I think she's
just coming in.
Yeah, she's been there. It's been connecting for a bit.
Has it?
Yeah, Leah, do you want to go ahead and do the land acknowledgement?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a really brief one today because we have a pretty packed agenda. But we definitely want to acknowledge that we are on the land of the traditional territory of many nations, including Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, Wendat peoples, and this land is now home to many diverse nations as well as us, and Inuit and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. By making this land acknowledgement, we seek to be allies and to take part in the art of reconciliation, honoring the Creator, the land, and the Indigenous heritage of Toronto.
Thank you, Leah. Yes. So why don't we just everybody? It's in the email that you received, the agenda for today, but also the past agenda. We just need to approve it from November. So if you've had a chance to look at that, I appreciate it. And if everybody's in agreement, we can just keep moving forward. But it is in your email. Just covers off what we talked about, obviously, in November. So can we just get an approval? Is it okay to move forward from that? Okay, thumbs up. See some. Okay, perfect. And then for today's agenda, we just have we just went through our welcome and introductions, the land acknowledgement. We'll have a presentation from Richard and Daniella from 10:15 to 10:45, and then we're going to recap our priority setting session that we went through. Leah's going to lead that process. I have to jump off the call at 11 for a legal thing that I have to deal with, but I'm going to be back on as quickly as I can get back on. And then we're going to go into some breakout rooms to discuss just some of our priority setting, and then we'll report back. The breakout groups will report back, and then we'll wrap up in the end. And hopefully, Michelle, we can tie in your issue at the very end. if that's okay with you. So that's the way we'll.
Yeah, if we don't have time for it, it can wait for another
Okay.
maybe.
But let's see. Let's do our best to work it in at the end if we can. Okay. Richard and Danielle, are you ready to go?
Actually, Greg, can I just jump in really,
Yes,
really
you
quickly
can.
because
Yes, you can.
we have a little bit of logistical work to do on breakout groups. Gabriella, who works closely with me, is on the call to help us get sorted for that part of the agenda. And so what she's going to do over the next few minutes is put people into the various groups so that when we hit that point, we can just run. So if you wouldn't mind, hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at the minutes, but there's 3 different priority areas. And if you wouldn't mind typing into the chat the priority area that you would like to discuss today. We each have we have half an hour to discuss these areas and then come up with immediate action items later on. So just do that, over the next 15 minutes or so Gabrielle can get that set up if you don't mind. Any questions on that? It's the PDF and the invite. Hopefully everybody can open that one up. And there's 3 priority areas. Some of us were actually there in November and signed up for areas then. So just type them again in the chat, or if you weren't there, have a look at the different areas and then type the one in that you'd like to focus on. I think they were SDP. Gabriella, what are we calling the second one?
I just put them on the chat. So
oh, perfect. Okay.
Operations and advocacy.
Perfect. Okay.
Thanks,
and
Liz.
Network operations is basically like how we work as a group and what we do, just the kind of administration logistics and making sure that we're as effective as we can be. SDP is pretty self-explanatory, and so is advocacy, I guess. And in the minutes, you'll see there's a few areas we thought could be interesting for us to pursue when it comes to advocacy. So, okay, great, thanks.
Sorry, Leah, is this for the purpose of putting us in a work group? Because I wonder if it might be easier just to kind of state group, number 1, 2, and 3. 1 is SDP, 2 is advocacy, and 3 is, and then we can just go into that ourselves.
Yeah, I think we'll either way. Gabrielle is probably already getting going as a few people are putting it in. So yeah, you can either say 1, 2, 3 or the group name, whatever is easier. Yeah, thanks, Sue. Okay.
Okay, so we're set, and we'll get the breakout rooms sorted out. But now let's bring the city in, and they're going to talk about their work that they've done with the SDP, social development planning, and just a broader scope. They've asked to attend our meetings to inform us where some of the work that the city's doing with the SDP. My work with both Richard and Daniella has been really helpful as far as understanding how it fits with the SDP. So Richard, I'm going to let you guys take it from there, okay?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having us and sharing the space. Daniella, do you want to pull up the PowerPoint and get started? Do you have access? Yeah, we should be good. All right, Daniella, you want to start us off?
Yes, great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing us to join you. My name is Daniella Castello, and I'm a community development worker with the City of Toronto, and I am joined by Richard Kirwan, the Community Development Officer for Downtown East. Today, we will be going through a presentation regarding supporting the Regent Park SDP, as well as talking a bit of a background of our different roles, youth engagement, strategic planning, as well as an upcoming funding opportunity that we have for the Regent Park neighborhood. So I'm going to pass it off to Richard next to talk a bit about the different investments and deliverables we have.
Perfect. Yeah. So so just to kind of define myself and Daniella's role a little bit further. So these are some of the deliverables that we have within our unit. Regent Park operations budget to build capacity for resident leaders and working engagement. That's 50,000. That's 50K budget that gets handed out every year. And we're on 20. I believe we're on 2022 of that. And then we have the Regent Park Legacy Fund, which has kind of gone a little bit into, it was sleeping for a bit, but we are bringing it back this year. And Danielle is going to speak a little bit more about that further down our presentation. And then there's the Regent Park sorry, so the Legacy Fund is myself and Daniella. There's a Regent Park SDP grant annually. We're on 2023 now. We have 2022 funding going out. Should be in people's accounts hopefully by the end of this month. And then we have the 2023 money that will be going out probably in the next month or two. And that's Oleg Sagan from the funding unit who manages those finances. The access to capacity building and certification works through the Strong Neighborhood Strategy. That's myself. And a lot of those things will start to come out in, we have one coming up in St. Jamestown, which is mental health first aid training. And I believe we have 30 spots for that. So that'll be coming out, and I'll be sending that out through the CCP network as well. And then we have access to investments and donations identified through the Downtown East cluster. So there's a few of you on that sit on that call and understand the how that donations kind of cycle works and some of the other investments that have come through there. Next slide. Good. So the TCHC ongoing revitalization, SDP, CBA partnership, that's myself. The social development plan and executive network alignment is myself and Daniella. And that's really one of the reasons why we're here today, is to really look at how we can align ourselves with the SDP and the executive network on how we kind of can come together and just look at and I'll go through it a little bit more, so I'll stop on that, and when I get there, I'll come back to it. So the individual lead not-for-profit organizations follow up to support greater staffing alignment within the SCD process as well. I'm going to talk about that today, and that's myself. City divisional engagement, which is the PFNR, TPH, TPL, city planning, anything that's kind of internal City of Toronto, that's myself. And the Regent Park Social Development Plan Stakeholders Table, Coordination and Communication Support, that's Daniella Castello. And then the Stakeholders Table Work Group Committee supports coordination engagement and some of that conflict resolution supports is Daniella.
Great, thank you. Also, I would just add, in terms of the city divisional engagement, we do have a pattern of using acronyms. So PFNR is Parks, Forest, and Recreation, TPH is Toronto Public Health, and then TPL is the Toronto Public Library.
My apologies. So what we're looking for from the table today to really have a conversation and chat about is what are some of the in-kind supports agencies are offering the SDP. Looking at creating a agency appendix of all the things that the agencies are offering to the SDP. And really looking to profile them on our city website as well to kind of show that, hey, this is what said organizations are offering to the SDP. I'll just quickly, like Regent Park Focus, one of their things is recording these and then bring them back to YouTube to spread to the community. So that's something that they would be offering. Identifying supports and knowledge hubs. What kind of supports and knowledge can agencies start to support the SDP with? What does that look like? Maybe possibly while doing staff trainings or something along like that, you can invite some of the SDP members to join those trainings if they're not in a confidential place or in a place that there's any liability there. Looking to bring in some SDP community members into those to kind of build up their capacity. Community building and outreach, looking at some of the clients that we all serve and how can we connect them to the SDP, and vice versa. How can the SDP connect the members of their community to organizations? And then looking at a year end, we do a city investment report, we do all these other investment reports, but we know that agencies are investing a ton of money in the SDP as well. And we'd like to report on that, and we'd like to show the great work that the agencies are doing in supporting the SDP. So that would be another thing that we're looking at. It would be an agency investments report of all the amount of stuff that the agencies are offering to the SDP. And then when we're looking at from a strategic staffing point, we're looking at strategic staffing to help support the SDP. So if we have community builders within our organization, looking at putting them on a community building network. If we have employment workers looking at staffing from organizations to those tables to support that, supporting with connectivities to services within the organization, and then using the SDP and the org as outreach assets, as I already mentioned. So if there is an employment program, how do we connect that employment program to the SDP table, and then the SDP table to back to the organization? So one of the things that we really want to talk about is the strategic staffing, and placing staff on tables that have expertise in that area. So if you have a staff that's sitting at the table for, say, 30 hours a week, would it be possible to look at having 2 staff and separating them into their strategic places or within the SDP network? So that's something that we'd like to ask the table if that's a possibility, especially with the employment supports, the safety. If it's safety, maybe having a youth worker sit at the safety table. If it's obviously the employment and economics table, looking at enhancing that table with employment staff. Pass it over to you, Daniella.
Yes, thank you. So another priority we have is youth engagement. Last year, we allocated $250,000 towards youth in Regent Park in a community-led process, which featured a panel of youth who received training on how to review grant applications, and ultimately they were the ones going through the applications, and they decided which projects would receive funding. So that was based off a donation that we received from the city from our former executive director, Chris Brillinger, who was a former community member in Regent Park. So once he sold his property, he decided to make a donation, and it led to this grant being available for youth projects. But youth continue to be a priority in the Regent Park neighborhood. So we also have a goal this year of connecting with agencies and youth outreach workers or other workers who are interested in prioritizing youth, or are currently engaging youth. So then we could discuss how we can have them represented in the network as well as them having leadership positions and informing the next round of like the SDP grant and what's to come next. So now I will talk about the legacy funds, and I have a brief background on it. So during the 1980s, Regent Park residents began sharing $2 a month over 3 years in a fundraising campaign so that they could build a community center in their neighborhood. By 1987, a community center was built, but no funds from the fundraiser were used. So these funds ended up staying in the Legacy Funds Trust, which was grown over time, and the money was transferred to the City of Toronto. And presently, the interest that's built on the trust is being set aside for a grant to the neighborhood. So the goals of the grant is to provide capacity building opportunities for residents to develop grant guidelines, as well as promote outreach materials, as well as encouraging Regent Park residents to share their ideas and community focused projects, as well as supporting community development, capacity building, and special events in Regent Park. As for why we're here today, we will need a trustee for this project. So I did outline the trustee roles as it relates to the legacy funds. And the 3 key roles are overseeing the grant fund disbursement, monitoring, and reporting, as well as providing workshops and training relevant to support the applicant's capacity building, as well as connecting with the community reference group, which are like the local knowledge keepers from the legacy funds, as well as designated City of Toronto staff, which would be myself and another colleague from the community funding unit and a TCHC staff member. All right, so this leads us to the end of our presentation, and I can open the floor now if there's any questions or comments.
Thank you, Richard and Daniella, appreciate the presentation. Does anyone have any questions right out of the box? Richard, do you want to, you or Daniella want to talk a bit about the SDP and just because I think most of the group knows, but if there's anyone in the room that doesn't know about it, do you guys want to talk about it a bit?
Daniella, do you want to go on that? That's in
Sure. Yeah, I could talk about the SDP network. So the SDP has existed for a couple of decades now in terms of when revitalization first, or discussions of revitalizations first began in Regent Park. And the social development plan is parallel to the physical development plan as Regent Park goes through the rebuilding of certain buildings, sorry, as Regent Park goes through like rebuilding TCHC housing as well as introducing market rentals or owned buildings as well. So essentially community members advocated for funds that would focus on supporting social cohesion and social inclusion. And in I believe in 2018, they were successful in advocacy, and beginning in 2019, as Richard shared earlier, 500,000 would be allocated on an annual basis for 5 years to the neighborhood through the city's social development and finance divisions, which brings us here today. Presently, the social development plan, or like the SDP, they have working groups and committees that meet on a varying basis. So the working groups are communications, community building, employment and economic development, as well as safety, and they typically meet once a month. And then we also have the community benefits oversight working group, which is a selected group representatives from the entire Regent Park neighborhood and different stakeholders who meet also once a month to discuss what the engagement process is going to look like for the community benefits plan as development continues to go through, which is a set amount. I believe it's 26.8 million that is going out to the neighborhood from that community benefits package, as well as the SDP has several committees. So there is the funding committee, there is the evaluation and benchmarks committee, as well as a planning committee. And terms of reference, I believe, is the last one. Yes, I see a hand from Michelle.
Thanks, Daniella. I just wanted to thank you for that overview. I know that, you know, an SDP sort of report like that lots of information, and there are documents sort of outlining how the SDP is working. I'm just wondering, is there a recent document that could be sent out just sort of with that structure? I have a staff who sits on multiple committees, and I still find it quite confusing sometimes to, you know, there's just a large and for me anyway, somewhat complex structure of different committees at the SDP. I was just wondering if you have something you could resend to this group that might be helpful to everyone, hopefully, perhaps, you know, some of the newer members or folks who are confused like me. So that was one question. The other one, Daniella and Richard, I just wanted to clarify. It sounded to me like, because like one of our priorities from our sessions at the end of last year was how do we support the SDP? So this is a good conversation, I think. What I heard, I think, was really looking for staff from Regent Park neighborhoods or agencies serving Regent Park with a priority on those working with youth and around employment issues. So I just wanted to, like, do you want folks from this group to be advocating or looking for staff who can help support those youth and employment initiatives? And are the other committees kind of okay? I mean, again, this might be a larger conversation, but I just wanted to make sure I'm clear on sort of what the ask is, Daniella and Richard.
Yeah, I think really what is kind of is there a specialty staff within your organization that would sit best on said table? But I think, Michelle, we really need to look at breaking this back down and maybe having some SDP members come and present to this table to really look at that. And then from an organizational standpoint, what is the best approach? So YSM has a little bit of a separate approach. They actually have two staff that are attached, and they've kind of divided them up into some of their specialties. So one staff is really engaged within the community building place, the community building table, and then another staff is really engaged within the benchmarks and evaluation stuff. So I think it would be best if the table would kind of have a larger understanding of kind of what's going on there, and then is there a staffing strategic piece that we could put forward. And I don't think it has to be, it might not have to be one staff from every organization, but it could be two staff to go here, two staff to go here, two staff to go here. Because we're also looking, obviously, from an agency standpoint, Michelle, and I know from the CCP tables, you know, bang for your buck is the best thing at this time, and really looking at how do we have that connectivity within organizations to the SDP, and also within partnerships within agencies that they can say, hey, let's offer, I can give one of this staff, you give one of that. And it's really about enhancing the tables. That's really all it's about. The tables are running great. They're doing awesome stuff, but how do we enhance them, and how do we connect and keep that connectivity with this table to them? Because I think there is a little bit of a gap between this table and the actual SDP tables. And that's really what we're looking to really close. And how do we strategically make that happen?
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, Donna, so that's great. I'm glad you have your hand up. Want to jump in?
I think
Roberta, I'm sorry. Roberta, I'm sorry, I missed your hand. Roberta, Donna, let me get Roberta in first.
Sure, thank you. I want to say that I'm very pleased to see that this is the first meeting I've actually been to related to Regent Park in a long time, where you've actually had an ask out for other people. I think I've been on the stakeholders table for years and years, and was of the understanding that only like really the ED or people that are in a position to make decisions are allowed on the stakeholder table or on the different breakout kind of ad hoc committees. So I really want to say thank you for like voicing the fact that you're looking for additional people within organizations, because we can't sit on everything and be on everything. It's far too hard and difficult to be attending all of these meetings. So that being said, I would love to have a summary of all the active tables and who's leading them and their contacts. I've been wanting to have our peacekeepers at our facility kind of connect with local community, like security policing kind of. I know that there was a committee at some point in the past, so I'm looking forward to see how our organization can connect in with active committees and do some better work with you. Miigwech.
Thank you,
Thank
Roberta.
you. Yeah, and I would add, so yeah, for sure we can share that information about like who the co-chairs for the working groups are, so that connection could happen. And definitely like seeing like connectivity with the Regent Park Safety Network, as they are interested in doing like safety audits or like community walkthroughs as well. And I know they'd be very excited to welcome you in like Toronto Birth Center or whoever those like knowledge keepers are that you have.
Thanks, Daniella. Adonis?
Yeah, glad to see you here, Daniella and Richard. This follows a request that actually the residents of the SDP co-chairs made up the ED network to be involved and to resource the SDP. So this is a follow-up from that formal request that we had, I think, prior to our break. There's two, I know that there's two priority areas in addition to what Daniella and Richard had spoke about in terms of employment and youth. I know that one area that is a priority with the SDP that the planning committee had talked about was around strategic planning. That the SDP really wants to be involved in the wants to be involved with strategic planning with its members, and would really like support from the ED network to help them carry out this process. So this was a specific request that has been asked by the SDP. The other thing, not necessarily a request from the SDP, it would be helpful to check with them. But one area that has always been a challenge, and the SDP is sort of stuck in, is around conflict resolution. A number of, well, there have been issues around that, and there doesn't seem to be a resolution to how members of the SDP can deal with conflict. There's no process for that to happen. And it would be really helpful, I think, if the ED network can play a role in helping to formulate a conflict process, resolution process for members of the SDP to be involved with. So those are two areas. And I just want to follow up that if you recall, there was a really, the ED network was engaged in a mediation process with TCHC and RPNA in terms of the community benefits network when they were stuck. And the ED network was extremely successful. As you could see that the community benefits network is on its way. They agreed. There was a great resolution process that was involved. And I feel that we could play a similar role in terms of conflict resolution process for the network. So those are two areas that I would like to push regarding SDP. Thanks.
Thank you, Adonis. Leah, did you have anything you wanted to contribute to that part of the discussion?
Well, I guess I just wanted to be clear on what the asks are from Richard and Daniella. Sorry, my cat's deciding to sneeze right now. But I think it's come out in conversation. So I'm just typing some minutes here because we don't have Danielle, or we don't have Diana, and I just wanted to make sure we're getting it down. But what I've got is, and anybody else jump in if there's additional things that I missed. We should consider as an EDN how we can build the capacity of community members by bringing them into training, like training that we're offering for our staff or meetings as appropriate that are relating to the community. There's also a request for us to consider how we can ensure we're providing expertise at various tables rather than spreading ourselves too thin across all the tables. The city noted employment and youth are priorities, but we've also raised as an EDN that strategic planning and conflict resolution are also seem to be priorities that we could support on. And then there were a couple of requests, an updated document that outlines who the SDP is and how they're structured, et cetera, what the current priorities are, if the city could avail that to us, as well as a summary of the current committees and what they need in terms of support and expertise and contact info for the co-chairs. Is there anything else in terms of like requests both ways that we should capture here?
Just one more thing was kind of the agency appendix that we'd like to look at is what are some of those in-kind supports and what do they look like to the SDP. It seems like this is a bit of SDP, but also a bit of Regent Park outside of the SDP work. So I think there's like two components to the table where there's SDP involved stuff, and then there's an actual ED network within Regent Park as well. So I think there's two sides to this table, or it seems like there's two sides to this table. I might be wrong, but also I think we should identify that to the SDP table as well, is that this is, yes, there is some focus on SDP, but there's also focus on a larger Regent Park picture as well, i.e. advocacy and some of the other things that we're talking. If I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong. Michelle, I see you.
Sorry, I was a little confused by that last, the SDP versus the Regent Park stuff. Richard, that's not what I was going to ask about, but so I'll just put a pin in that for a second. But yeah, I'm a little confused about what that means, the differentiation between SDP and Regent Park. So if you could just explain that a little more, if you don't mind. I also, though, thought I heard from Daniella and Richard, I don't know if it was a request, suggestion of SDP representatives coming to this table to give updates. I know that's happened in the past, but I just wanted to see if that's something that can be built in, or if that makes sense for this group to, be getting information in an ongoing way about what's going on at the SDP and what's needed. Not sure if that's an ask. That's what I thought I heard.
I would say a presentation that they would come in and just realign everything, to your point of Michelle, like all the moving parts that are happening, and bringing in saying, hey, these are the working groups, these are the subcommittees, these are the things that are happening, and just realign everything. It's your table. I don't think that they should necessarily come here every week or every time with you all, but just maybe to reintegrate that, hey, this is what's happening. And there has been a lot of working tables that have kind of built out, like they just built out the strategic planning table, and one or two other smaller tables that I really think this table needs to be aware of. And it's much better, I think, to hear it from the residents. So it might be an ask that we could have for them to come and do a presentation to the table, just to realign and bring everything back to kind of ground zero, and then starting to build up again.
Thanks, Richard. Donis?
Yeah,
Michelle, did that answer your question? Michelle, did that answer?
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Greg.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on this. Yes, I agree that the SDP itself should be presenting, but also we do have a standing agenda in terms of our co-chair, the SDP co-chair, which is led by the ED agency co-chair, which is Greg. So there's always a presentation of the status of the SDP. The other thing I say, it's not so much that agencies need to go out of their way and support the SDP. That's great, but the real issue, I think, is aligning our work with the SDP, that there are goals that each of our agencies have. And this is a network that supports the community. So if your goals are a reflection of the work in Regent Park, then there's certainly agencies could find work to align their priorities with the SDP. So it's like that the SDP is also helping the agencies to meet their needs, meet their own priorities. So that's a really important part. It's not that we want agencies necessarily just to help the SDP. That's not the point. The point to me is aligning our work with the work of the SDP. I know there's a little bit of distinction there, but yes.
No, and I think that was part of the presentation pieces there, Adonis, was that back and forth, that we're kind of all in this together, and there's support that the SDP can have to agencies, i.e. outreach, community connectivity, all those things. And then there's support that agencies should have. And what does that look like? And I think we just have to figure that out, because I think the table is struggling with what that looks like and what this table looks like.
I'd also add, like in terms of like that, what that could possibly look like. For example, like if there's an agency who is interested in a certain working group, but presently there's not a staff member who's able to go to the monthly meetings, even if you were to reach out to be on the agenda for 15 minutes and you can talk about some of the services, programs that you do offer to the network, I think would be really valuable. So for example, it could be going to the safety network and talking about, like what are some like legal resources that they can access, what are some integrated mental health supports, or even if they're in a time of crisis and they're interested in like non-police interventions, what supports are available from those other community members, such as yourself. And again, I think looking at it with a bit of flexibility, in the sense that if you're not able to go to a monthly meeting, or you're not able to go on an agenda item, seeing myself and Richard as possible relayers of that message, if you want to send us some content, whether that's like an email message or even a social media post, so then we could still share that message with other individuals who are interested and would find that information useful, is something that we could also support with.
Thank you, Daniella. Thank you, Richard and Daniella. Really helpful. I think this group will likely want to have you guys back regularly. to talk to us about the work that you're doing. Adonis, is that an old hand? Yeah, okay, great. I think we're going to wrap up this part of the presentation and we're going to move on to our breakout rooms. Unless you want to leave us with anything, Richard or Daniella.
I just want to say thank you.
I just have one more question before we go, because I'm not sure if Michelle's question about the, when you were kind of differentiating between the SDP and the Regent Park community. I don't know if that was answered, and I think that's something maybe that would be helpful for us to understand before we head into our breakout session on the SDP. So maybe Richard, can you just help us understand what you're thinking there?
Sure. So from a city perspective, we see the SDP is all of Regent Park. That's what it is. Now, there's a little bit of I think a difference of opinion. Adonis is shaking his head. Now, there's a difference of opinion with what the city sees the SDPs. We see it as all of Regent Park. It's a revitalization of all of Regent Park. The SDP tables that have kind of been built up in the 4 quadrants, or let's say the planning table, that SDP considers that to be the SDP, and decisions made from the SDP sit at that table. So I know it was a little bit confusing when I was saying it, but there's 2 different opinions. There's one from the city, which SDP is all of Regent Park, and there's one from, and I think Adonis could probably speak to that a little bit more, because we necessarily don't have the same views on it as the table does. Not Adonis per se, Adonis, I'm not calling you out, but the table as a whole have a different view on it from the city. So that's why I think that the table, what is the connectivity directly to the ideology of the SDP that they have? And then there's the larger piece that I think the city is on page, I think with some of the people at this call, that the SDP is all of Regent Park.
Yeah, so you're saying the current SDP is not sufficiently representative or broad enough to be considered all of Regent Park. So you want to make sure you're listening to other voices at this time.
Yeah, 100%. And trying to bring them to the table. That's one of the major things that we've been struggling with, is what does that outreach look like, and how do we get members from Regent Park that aren't necessarily connected to the SDP, how do we get them connected to the SDP? And if they don't want to be connected to the SDP in that formal sense, how do we still support their work and go on? Adonis, I know we can get into a long conversation about this. I don't think this is the time or place. Maybe we can come back in a little bit and go after it. But I do just want to say, Roberta, Richard, Jeremy, Jenny, I'll send you all an email to connect you to this community coordination plan, if that's something that you all would like to do. And I can kind of give you a brief on that, because I think that's beneficial for all of you. And Adonis, sorry, you're here as well. I know you come to maybe 1 or 2 of those calls, but I'll send emails to all of you to connect you. Richard, could I just get your email? Sorry, Richard Lee.
And want to drop it in the chat box?
Yeah,
we also had a question from Michelle in terms of the geography of SDP. So in terms of how the network sees like the boundaries of the network, so it's south side of Gerrard Street East, north side of Shooter Street, east of Parliament, and River Street.
And the city boundaries are the same. There's no difference. That's the Regent Park neighborhood. That's the NIA. That's the there's no difference. The city would just expand a little bit above some of those places where the SDP is very specific on their expansion into other lanes of it. But we consider Regent Park to be the same as the network as well.
Thanks, Richard. Adonis, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I wasn't going to get into a debate with you, Richard. Actually, I was gonna support you. I think you were very accurate in terms of how the SDP sees themselves and how the city sees SDP. So I had no debate there. I think that's all I just want to say is that's really an importance of the strategic plan, to have those discussions and collectively figure out in terms of the values and where the SDP is going. So I agree, but I think the important part is being able to really come together and strategically look at the SDP, and so that they could be able to identify how they see themselves.
Thanks, Adonis. And also thank you for reminding me about what the requests from the SDP to work collaboratively with this group on the strategic plan and to have some support from this group. So Leah, I shared that with you in an email. So maybe that could be part of the conversation too, is how we can support the SDP in developing their strategic plan. And maybe it ties into some of what other organizations are doing. Listen, Leah, I'm going to have Richard, Daniella, thank you very much. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your contribution. And we're going to jump into our next agenda item, okay?
Yes,
Awesome.
myself and Richard are going to head off so you can continue your strategic planning discussions as the ED network. But again, thank you for opening up some time for us to share a bit more about the work we're doing, and looking forward to connecting soon.
Leah, anything else? Leah?
That's great. No, it's been good to have you guys. Thank you. Very relevant discussion for today, actually.
And
Thanks again for coming.
And if there's anything from the city that you all need, please reach out to me. I'll throw my chat in the email. There's also a massive community development plan that's going to be happening in Moss Park in the downtown east that has another CDO attached to it. But there's a lot of stuff happening in and around Regent Park over the next little bit. And we want to make sure that everyone's also connected with Tridel and Daniels and some of the other structural and infrastructure investments that's happening in the city as well. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Everyone enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Leah, I'm going to have to jump off for a bit. I'm going to try to get back on. I just have something I have to manage. Okay.
Okay. No worries. Okay. Well, let's jump into our breakout group. So let me just, I can move us forward pretty quickly on this agenda item. We can get started. All you really need is the minutes. The minutes were very succinct from November. And so you'll see the 3 different groups laid out quite clearly what we had talked about last time if you weren't there. That's a starting point. I think, once you get into your breakouts, if you haven't had a look at that yet, just take a minute to read through. And then the goal, if we look at the agenda item here, let me get back to it. The goal for today is really just to come out of these groups at 11:30. So we've got about half an hour now, with a small list of action items that we could get going on in the coming 3 months. So these are our annual priorities. We'll probably do this exercise every year. And so what we're looking for is just something that can get us started. Like, what are a few things we need to do? Likely these priority areas will have, little groups that meet apart from this meeting, where we can actually move things forward a little more quickly. And then those groups that just report back to this group. So today we're not looking to figure out how all of that works yet. We're just looking to, how can we kick this off? What are a few things we can do? As well as if there's any budgetary resources that you can think of that we'll need pretty early on, you would note those too. And then at 11:30, we'll all come back. I think, Gabriella, it's going to automatically kick us out at 11:30, right? And bring us all back to the main group.
Yeah, it's a setting. It's already done for 11:30.
Okay.
Just a heads up, there's 5 people on advocacy, 3 on network operations, and 2 on SDP. Is that okay?
Did you put me in SDP?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's me and only one other person.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We've had some great discussion already. A lot came out of that talk with the city, so we're probably good to run. Is Greg in one of them?
So is Regent Park Focus, which I believe is Johnny.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, but is Greg Gary in one of them? He'd probably be interested in the SDP as well.
So I believe he's not here right now. Let me check.
Right. When he comes back in, well, whatever. We'll see. If you could add him. No, you can't add him if he's not here. Okay. That's all right.
And Linda, sorry. And Linda Jackson, I don't know which group you want to be added to.
Whatever. It sounds like it's probably better to have 2 groups rather than 3 if there's only 2 people in one group. I'm happy to go wherever you want, but I'm not going to add a lot of value with the SDP because I never quite understand it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we should, since we had a huge discussion about the SDP, whether that could be put up to a larger meeting and just go with the 2 priority areas.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And we can devote next meeting to the SDP specifically. Okay, sure. So, Gabriella, where are we needed?
Network operations.
Okay.
With me. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, we'll see you all there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, service integration and coordination.
Good. Okay, well, it looks like everyone's back. I know a few people had to drop off already. So, and Greg, we ended up just doing 2 groups because we didn't have critical mass in the SDP, and we had already had a great discussion with the city. So we can carry that one forward maybe more fully as a group at the next meeting. So we have the, how we work as a network. That's one group. And then we have advocacy. And the rest of the meeting, except for just a brief conversation about Councillor Moyes at the end, is really just meant to debrief from this group work and see what makes sense to move forward with. So I don't mind. I took notes for our group, which was the network collaboration, how we work as an EDN. And so maybe I'll just read those out, and anyone from my group can jump in and whatever I've missed. So we landed on kind of 3 buckets in terms of thinking about how we operate as a network. One is meetings, the other is coordination and resource sharing, and then the third is funding. And so we had a few main points and a couple of action items that we think could work in the next couple of months. In terms of meetings, something we'd like to propose to think about as a group is that we form a number of committees that could do some of the work and simply report back. And so we've already touched on this today, but that might mean that we could have fewer meetings because there's a general sense that we're all stretched fairly thin. And, now that there's a number of tables that we're all part of, right? And so it's sometimes hard to bring, a fully prepared mindset. We all admitted that we often just read the minutes and the agenda just before we jump into this call. And so if that's, the kind of time we're able to put into monthly meetings, maybe it makes more sense just to focus a little bit more and meet less frequently, but do some of the legwork between meetings. In terms of what those committees would be, we thought that obviously our priorities, so the SDP, how we operate as a group, the ED network, and advocacy. And then there was the suggestion that maybe also youth engagement, although we want to be careful to not have too many committees. Let's see. Yeah, so that's it on meetings. I guess the only action item there would be for us to consider at what point we want to try this. Like try actually forming committees and maybe meeting a little less frequently, every other month or something like that, if we're ready for that yet. So we can note that down in the minutes. And I guess, Greg, you and I can talk about it, or we can have a discussion here.
Yeah, I'm open just having a discussion here if there's time.
Okay. Well, let me go through our other ones here and then we'll see if we have time. Coordination and resource sharing. Actually, there's a couple of easy actions here. We recalled that there had been a sheet that was prepared, probably just a Word document, a few years ago that listed all of the agencies in this group and what we do. And so we thought we should revive that. And but then we remember that we also have the Hello Neighbor app, which I think many of you are familiar with. And that is something that YSM developed in collaboration with one of the groups in the SDP. And so it's actually got probably most of our organizations on it. We thought it might be fun to bring someone that's been working on that in the community and maybe a staff member from YSM as well into this group next meeting and give a demo. And then we can all download it and start updating our information and just making sure that we can see each other on the app, because that's kind of what it's for. It does a lot more than that too. So I think if we just start using the app, the coordination and resource sharing could be actually, that could be a huge step forward. There were a few other ideas we had under this coordination. One of them was to do something like a bi-monthly event that's focused on a particular area of need, say health or youth or women. And the agencies among us who are focused on that work would create the event together. And so apparently that had been done a little bit in the past. And what it did was it brought agencies together to get to know each other and what they offer, as well as bringing the community in so that they can understand what services are provided in that particular area. It's an idea to put on the table. And also we wanted to make sure we have a way for us to know what's going on in the other networks, like the CCP that Richard talked about today, the Community Coordination Plan, as well as the Ontario Health Teams, the OHTs. Those are probably two of the big ones, but there could be others. So maybe a standing agenda item for those, a rep among us who's on those different groups to give an update. On the funding, we recognize that, maybe one reason why we haven't gotten a whole lot done in the past few years is because we just don't have the resources. One member in our group recalled that back when we did have, I think YSM was providing a person to serve us, it felt like we just were able to get a little bit of momentum from that support. So it was noted that St. Jamestown does have, I think it was the corner it was called, they have some community engagement work that's funded, and they're doing similar work to what we're doing. So Linda has a contact there. We could follow up to find out more. Also, it was noted that the SDP has been asking for a staff person to support them. So could we work with them to see if that staff person could also support us, since we're working on similar things? So a couple of easy action items there too. I think we have a couple minutes for questions or discussion, Greg, since we only have two groups. Oh, sorry, Greg, muted.
Michelle.
Oh, thanks, Greg, and thanks, Leah. I just wanted to clarify your last point, Leah, about SDP looking for a staff person. I had been told that some of the SDP staff thought that Daniella was their staff person, but I just want confirmation if anybody knows, is Daniella from the city the staff person to the SDP, or she's not? They currently don't have someone?
Are you going to answer that, Adonis?
So, yeah, sure. No, Daniella is from the city. She helps to support the SDP from the city's perspective. But also we have monies to hire, the SDP has money to hire a staff administrator, and they'll be hired shortly. So there's an administrator staff that will be coming aboard. Does that help, Michelle? And
yes, it does. Thank you, Adonis. Thanks. That clarifies it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Just Leah, did you want to elaborate on anything, or is there something an area you want the group to respond to that you identified?
Well, I guess does it make sense to bring in a demo on the Hello Neighbor app next meeting? Would that be of interest?
Yeah, I think
okay.
So.
All right, we can make that happen. And I think just a little bit of legwork with St. Jamestown, and I can follow up with you, Linda, on that, and with you, Adonis, on the administrator for Regent Park, STP. I guess the big question is like committees and meetings. It's kind of it's a proposal to make a shift, and we're not all here today. This is probably only represents half of us right now. So I don't know if this group is comfortable just making a call. Hey, yeah, let's meet every other month instead, and let's form these committees. I just think we maybe need a little more discussion. Maybe something we throw out in email, like a follow-on email, and just get people to think about there. And maybe at the next meeting, we can have a short discussion and decide. I don't know. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, Leah, I would say that I think it would be helpful if we have some more meetings around, like if each of the committees that we're thinking about, that there's an action plan for each of the committees before we break off, because they might need support in terms of putting together action plans. And then once the action plans are formed, at least we know where we're going. And then we could have less meetings in terms of the whole body.
Jenny, Jenny, when we were in our group, we had started talking about how the three other committees, and Roberta had mentioned it too. So I don't know, there seems like there's a bit of bridging here to have a discussion about just the two. Do you think so, Jenny and Roberta? Do you think there's this kind of is a broader conversation about just the committees and how that's going to work. Jenny, you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah. So we kind of came back to that old nugget that I think the shared advocacy discussion continually goes back to, which is what's really our terms of reference, like what's our process for landing on, say, the top few issues that we're going to advocate around, and how do we kind of get legitimacy as managers in local organizations to claim that we're speaking for the community, right? So I think I just sent to Greg the most recent terms of reference that I have, but I may not be totally up to date. It's from November 2021, when some of you might remember that during the pandemic we thought maybe this is a good time to kind of go back to basics and look at the Regent Park Executive Directors Network's terms of reference, and what the various subcommittees are and what their terms of reference are. It's, as far as I understand, it's not finalized. My document still has lots of comments from some folks who have moved on from this network. So I wonder if maybe even if that could be circulated to everybody, and maybe we could have a bit of a guided discussion at the next meeting to answer some questions that may still be outstanding there. And then Roberta, if I thought your comment was actually a really good one, and I share what a few other people have said, which is I don't feel like I totally have a handle on the social development plan, the SDP, and our relationship to it. But I think what I've picked up over the months that I've been involved with this group is that this group was born out of the Regent Park redevelopment, and the idea is that we are the key link from the SDP, right? So Roberta raised the questions. I mean, we had a discussion in our breakout group that acknowledged that most, if not all, of our organizations have broader catchment areas or footprints than the Regent Park geographical zone. But there are some folks who that's a discussion whether we want to bring larger voices, a larger group of voices, into dictating what our advocacy priorities should be, or if we really need to just stick to the sort of first principles, which is that this group is about supporting the Regent Park redevelopment and what the concerns of local residents there are. Do you want to add anything to that, Roberta? I thought your comment was a good one. Or did I reflect it correctly?
No, I think that summarizes it effectively. It's really like keeping that focus back, because it says Regent Park Executive Directors Network. Let's keep it focused on Regent Park, and if there is broader things that this network wants to do and support one another and kind of like work towards, that's great. But really the work plan should focus on the Regent Park community. And knowing exactly what those committees are. I think that was the other kind of like, oh, okay, there's other committees, subcommittees that have existed over time. Let's get a list of those and let's actively kind of get those subcommittees working again. And totally agree, if these meetings for the network is every other month, then it allows subcommittees some time to do some work in between and to report back at the next meeting. So where are we at? How can we move this along? Where are we going forward? But again, I realize that we need a bigger strategic plan that kind of wraps it all up. But I think it's doable.
Leah?
Yeah, that's great. That's really helpful. I'm glad you guys were talking about this too. I just made a couple of other notes to Greg. You and I should probably dust off that TOR and bring it to
I'm going to
the group.
circulate it as soon as we get. Thank you, Jenny.
No, I think we can go on to just in light of time, we can go on to back to you guys. Advocacy group.
Is there anything else from the advocacy? Because I joined it late, but I did get to hear the part I just spoke about. Is anything else the group wants to share?
You mean the advocacy group or the other group?
The other group, the group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything that I missed, I guess group members feel free just to jump in.
I think that you did a great job, Leah. I think that the challenge is bandwidth of how to get the work done. I think actually it's compelling to stay in Regent Park, and I think often that maybe our biggest opportunity is actually that focus on advocacy, like, because sometimes we try to get broader. If we're going to actually develop committees, we just have to think about, committee structure and, and do we go, like, this is also the ED network. So it's the people that actually can make decisions in their organization. Do we actually need to be a little broader in terms of membership on those committees if we're going to actually get the work done? That's my worry. Is I think that just people we were talking in our committee that this network also formed before the Ontario Health Teams formed. And so many of the health organizations are so now kind of stretched on the Ontario Health front that it's actually sometimes hard to actually have anything left in your calendar. And that's a bit of the challenge on some of our part, which we chat a little bit about.
Yeah, Linda, I'm gonna agree with you just in the co-chair role and the role that's kind of what I sat in for almost over a year for sure, and just the demands of this role to at that table and trying to maintain a neutral position and for the ED network, because that's really one of the challenges, because there's issues that surface from the just from the social development planning group that when I'm sitting there as a representative of the ED network and a representative of the club that I'm an executive director for, and how you balance that and how you navigate that is really a challenge, and not getting pulled either way, the city or to the SDP. There's major challenges there that I think this group could really be helpful. If there was a smaller committee, almost just a group that you consulted with regularly between those months after some of those stakeholder planning meetings, and just kind of strategize and have a plan of what you can bring back to the group and say, I need support, or do we want to support in these areas? And because I think there's lots comes out of it, but where you take it is really, it's just sometimes it's just sitting there. And I think Adonis kind of said it earlier, just helping out, but not leading it, but being a part of it, being a part of it. And I think this network's a part of it, and they're not asking anyone to lead it or to tell us how to do it, but they want us to join them. And that's just, I know this whole group's been around it forever, but just that's my experience. And I really think we can do, probably whoever's leading it from here as a co-chair could get better guidance from this group or support and direction from this group. I don't know if that's helpful, and I'm definitely not calling out the group at all. I'm just more saying this is my experience over the past year and a half, because I wasn't in the community when I joined and when I took over the leadership role, and it was kind of like one of those things where everybody stepped back and I ended up out front. And so I'm just like, but it's there's a lot, and your time commitment is really high if you're actually attending to it and really participating and listening and being a part of it. And the conflicts and all of those things, there's a lot to resolve and a lot to work with. So I think this position, and Leah's going to be in this role soon, is really needs to be able to bring it back to the table and give direction, because you don't want to be representing the ED network in a way that this group does not want you representing it and taking positions that's not this group's position, because you are representing the network when you were in those rooms. And I think that's a challenge. That was long, but that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's good, Greg. Thanks. We have so much to talk about when it comes to the SDP. Let's move on to the advocacy group, if that's okay, just to make sure they have enough time to talk about their action items.
Sorry, but feel free, anybody else who was in that room, to jump in. But I don't actually think we have that much more to share. We sort of pretty quickly identified the need for confirming the terms of reference of the ED network, and then confirming the terms of reference for the advocacy subcommittee, so that we could have a clear process in place in order to determine which three are of most importance for the Regent Park community.
Yeah, I thought you put it out there pretty clearly, Jenny, on what the issues, with the things that you wanted to address. And now I think we just have to figure out how those committees are going to work. The one's active. I would say the youth one, I think Serena reports back and forth. Yours got put on hold, the one that you were, I think, leading. And the third one, I have to be honest, I don't really remember it ever being that active. So I think that's the update. I mean, from that group, Leah.
But I guess Greg, sorry if I can add
Yeah,
in.
jump in.
We did do a strategic planning recently, and I think so that should give us some guidance, not because the terms of reference are a little older than what we just went through. So just to keep that balance and look at how, yeah, we might change the terms of reference based on the strategic planning that we just did and where members want to go with it.
Is that the November one?
Yes, the November one. Essentially, how do we implement the strategic plan is really.
Right. And Jenny, are you thinking that the terms of reference are a different document than what we went through in November? Because I think you were there for some of it. The priority setting session that we went through, strategic planning, like the terms of reference, do you view that as a kind of a different document?
Yes, I attached it to the email I sent you just now, Greg, so you'll see what the most recent terms of reference document that I had.
Okay.
I was at the November strategic planning session, but I don't think it pulled out the terms of reference I don't think we looked at them.
So we still, for the longer term work and how this group works, we need to define the terms of references really clearly, and then the other priorities are almost, they can grow out of that, but how we reach those conclusions are going to be based on the terms of reference. Is that the group's thinking? So we have our terms of reference. Adonis just identified our strategic plan or our priority setting session. So we had that session. So what do we need to do as a group to say, okay, now this is where we're going. And this is, as a group, we decided we're going to prioritize these 3 or 4 different things. Do we need to refer back to the terms of reference before we make those decisions? I'm asking the group. I don't know the answer to that.
I personally think that the November session was good in terms of broadly stating a direction. I think that we need to sort of look at what we said we would do in the November statement, look at, and today we've been talking about how we essentially can implement that strategic plan. But I think we need to be clearer about that and then figure out if the terms of reference are supportive in the actions that we want to do, and if not, revise those terms of reference. That's my view.
Can you jump in, Roberta?
Sorry, I'm just kind of confused because I hear strategic plan, I hear priorities. So I got confused thinking there's another strategic plan that was actually developed when it sounds like it's just the minutes from the last meeting of priorities. So sorry about that confusion.
No, that's okay. So what did it make you think of anything, or just as far as direction goes, or?
Yeah, that we need a strategic plan of the work that's going to be done over the next couple of years, like a multi-year plan, so that we're not spinning our wheels.
And can that be developed from the priority setting session? Can that be the origin of some of that?
I think it can be, and I'm just also wondering how far down we've had some consultation with the actual stakeholder tables with the residents to kind of float that back to them and see what they have to say about it. Because I'm assuming this was just generated by the network, and it also needs to feed back to the grassroots level to get confirmation of what the priorities are, and then kind of popped into a strategic plan.
Leah, any comment on any of this? I mean, because you and I are going to be working on it after the meeting, so any comment?
Yeah, we have our TOR. We pull that up. It's old. We dust it off, see what we can carry forward. It might have a mission statement, a vision statement. It's got committees. We have to ask ourselves, are those still valid committees? And now we have the priority setting exercise was a really practical one, right? So it's almost like it jumped into a portion of what a strategic plan would be. And I agree with Roberta, we should probably look at, like 3 years out. The SDP, Regent Park is probably a little too volatile for us to consider anything longer than that at this point. But yeah, let's start with that TOR and let's see if we can kind of merge that with our priorities to create a strategic plan. it's a lot of work. Who's going to do that? Kind of comes down to the question of funding again, right?
And unless somebody has something else to contribute, I'll make this suggestion. Can Leah and I go away from this meeting and come back with a bit of a plan on how to use the information we've collected today and circulate it to the group, and then in our next meeting talk about where we think we can go from here? Is that okay? Is the group okay with that? Okay, great. Then we'll do that. Michelle, I wanted to give you that time that you had asked for at the beginning of the meeting to.
Oh, thanks, Greg. I'm sorry to shoehorn this in. I just, wanted to make the group aware that our councillor Moisey, as I mentioned, had actually voted against the motion for warming centers to be kept open for the rest of the winter. And I think a few folks were a bit surprised and shocked with that vote on his part. And just to put out to the network, doesn't have to happen now or at the next meeting. Maybe I just wanted to make a suggestion. If we could spend a bit of time, once we get our terms of reference figured out and our priorities, perhaps asking the councillor to come to this meeting. I think I would like to. I assume many folks who work at agencies throughout Regent Park would like to get a better sense of what his priorities and visions are. Given that, as I say, I didn't anticipate that he would vote against that, and that was just my suggestion or ask that I wanted to bring to this network, to make sure everybody was aware of that and to just see how folks would feel about it some point in time. And hopefully in the not too distant future, asking him to come once we have sort of some questions developed or issues that we want to ask him about.
Okay.
Just to see if there'd be agreement with that, but it doesn't have to happen. We have other work to do, obviously, so I didn't want to push anything aside. Just to put that on our agenda, if we could, if people agree.
But your ask is to bring the councillor to a meeting for a conversation.
It is an ask, yeah, just to see if the network would agree or.
Okay, we'll give that some thought, okay? And
thank you.
See what we can get to on it. Is there any other business? Leah, do you have anything? Okay, anyone else have any other business today? I mean, a lot of work went into today's meeting. There needs to be a follow-up. I mean, we talked about a lot. I thought the city did a good job, and we just need to really get a clear understanding where this group and the SDP intersect and how we work together with the SDP. I think that's the goal. So Leah and myself will take some time and get back to the group with just some ideas on how we can continue to move forward. Thank you for today. I think it's noon. Let's call it morning and have a good rest of your day, okay?
Great to see everyone. Thank you.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please follow our social media platforms. For more information, check out our website.